Mr. Diaz, my questions will be for you today. Can the Canadian government help meet the targets of the Paris Agreement by interfering in the financial system and by imposing mandatory climate-related disclosures?
Well, I just think it's interesting that the gentleman previous said that we should not expand on natural gas, because the way that the U.S. has absolutely crushed its emissions goals is by shifting from coal to natural gas. And it was done so by financing projects, certainly at the bank level, definitely at pension fund level, and obviously there's some private there was some private money in there too. So the idea that, I mean, is the goal to end the fossil fuel industry, or is the goal to end emissions? That's the first thing. The second thing, yes, that would be an important consideration when you think about reducing emissions. The probably most important example of using fossil fuels to drastically, we're not talking about a little bit here, but we're talking about 20% over maybe a 10 or 12-year period, was through a transition to natural gas.
You mentioned the principle of fiduciary duty. Should average Canadians be worried if the government is undermining this principle by trying to achieve a global environmental objective through financial institutions?
I think that having worked for large financial institutions, it's important to understand how and why and when these people get paid. And it is absolutely not to meet global or countrywide green energy goals. There are several examples, for example, of, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to give specific names, of ETFs as an example that claim to be, designed to support the climate initiatives or whatever, but really what they do is they exploit people's good intentions, or I would say noble view that emissions should be lower or what have you. The consultants that you've heard are the exact same way. If tomorrow someone invented a machine that it immediately fixed climate change at the snap of a finger, those consultants would all be out of business, and I'm sure that they would be reluctant to suggest that as a means to dealing with this obviously very big problem. And so I think it's very, very important that we keep those people's incentives front of mind, and kind of holding that fiduciary duty as a sacred sort of totem for, those investors should be representing the financial interests of those clients first and foremost, above all else, and allowing for legislation if you want to ban oil and gas, bring it to Parliament and let's vote on it. And not going through the back door, really, is the way I see it. Subverting those fiduciary duties that these investors have on their behalf of their clients.
Can you explain how consultants and financial institutions will financially benefit from a climate-related disclosures or ESG ratings at the expense and return for Canadians?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's be honest. The ESG, some of the companies that are supposed to be leaders in this ESG stuff, it's basically just a tick-boxing exercise. And it's really important because through the advent of ETFs, the brokerage fees, the fees that these large asset managers were able to charge have basically been destroyed. You used to be able to, through all kinds of either research dollars or soft dollars, you'd be able to charge hundreds of basis points to your clients on behalf, and in order for the assets that you are managing. ETFs basically allowed individuals to buy pieces of, let's say, the S&P 500 for a de minimis amount of money. It absolutely destroyed that part of the business. And so why the financial markets, financial businesses have been so readily willing to sign up to these sustainable investment stuff, green energy policy, ESG, is because if they say, oh, it's expensive to do the due diligence around this business. And so so of course that expensive means that you're adding value. You're doing a job as the financial guy or girl to see if this business is really meeting their climate objectives. Well, what you end up doing is you end up now you supposedly adding value, and then you're allowed to charge a lot of money for that value. Therefore, your margins go up because instead of charging 5 basis points on an S&P 500 ETF, you're now allowed to charge 60 basis points for a product that basically does exactly the same with scarcely any reporting. And not to mention that there was, for example, it's not at all clear that they even meet the objective that they even set. So, for example, there's a vegan climate ETF that charges 60 basis points of management expense ratio that basically just tracks the S&P 500, which you can buy for 5 basis points. So, the company's happy, the regulators are happy, the consultants are happy, and the only person who seems to lose out is the individual who genuinely cares about either being vegan or about the climate or what have you.
Do you think the end goal of the concept we are studying today is an attempt to starve capital from Canadian natural resource companies?
Yes, I do, and I think that's why I put in my opening statement that green energy policy is the greatest gift to the oil industry and their shareholders. You are starving companies of capital that are notorious for badly allocating capital. And that's why, from a CFA perspective, you look at cash flow, free cash flow yields. It is about your cash flow relative to your capital expenditure. And the entire apparatus is about is constraining the capital expenditure for a product.
We'll have to stop there and go to Mr. Longfield. Mr. Leslie, 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Diaz, it looked like you were ready to jump in at one of my colleagues' opportunities to clarify something, so feel free to jump in with what you're planning to say.
I just think the idea that there are no trade-offs is, to me, one of the major fallacies of this kind of analysis and work. And I think what you're seeing is a perfect example of that in Germany. Germany's economy shut down nuclear power plants and is transitioning to renewable energies, and as a function of that, their industrial production has collapsed. And their unemployment rates are rising. Their economy was centered on turning cheap energy into products that we all wanted. And the Madame outlined that you don't care about people. And I would tell you, as a person who grew up in a working class neighborhood, working class parents, employment and your economy growing is the single best way that you can improve the lot in life of underprivileged people who don't have fancy degrees, and certainly in our consultants. And so I think that this idea that there are no trade-offs to constraining and basically shuttering the single most important importer of hard currency to our economy in the form of fossil fuels is to me very naive, and I would argue disassociated from the fact.
Maybe just to expand on that, and hopefully rather briefly, is there a scenario where this intensive focus on ESG would not actually slow down growth, that this actually can induce real growth in our economy, or is it going to be more likely the latter outcome which you just alluded to?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the reality, yes, I think that it's the prisoner's dilemma. I think that if every single country in the world, including China, Indonesia, and India, who are expanding their coal, and the lady mentioned that they were increasing renewables, I would just submit to you to please look up the actual numbers of new coal fire power plants that they built in 2023, 102 gigawatts. That's more than the entire world's coal expansion in one country. If every single country were to all do this at the exact same time, then maybe I would argue it would have some benign impact. But we know that that's not happening, and so then as a function of that, capital will simply flow to the countries that don't care about the environment.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to cede the rest of my time to Mr. Mazur.
Mr. Chair,
I'd like to speak to that. Thanks.
Present the following notice of motion. So this is just a notice. Given that between June 1st, 2024 and September 12th, 2024, Justin Trudeau, A, logged over 92,000 kilometers of jet travel across 58 different trips, B, was in the air at least once every 2 days on average, C, traveled enough this summer to circle the globe twice over.
Just questioning the relevance to today's meeting with respect to Mr. Mazur's motion. Are we discussing the Prime Minister at all today? Or?
Yeah, he's not moving a motion. He's giving a notice.
We're in a meeting.
I have a question though for the clerk. Does this? This is within the 3 minutes. At 3 minutes, do we stop, or does Mr. Mazur get to continue to speak to give a notice of motion? Or yeah, I think to be honest, since we're not debating the motion, I mean, you could.
So I had a minute left.
Well, you
It's
don't
been
have a minute.
interrupted.
No, it was like we had like about 30 seconds left. So
So you won't let me give a notice of motion?
give the
It's
notice
not
of
that long,
motion.
it's only 5 points.
Well,
it's half done
but
it.
that's eating up a lot of time. So
30 seconds.
Chair, I just like to question why we're doing this at the end of the meeting when, notice of motion can be done electronically.
Yeah.
Whether if it's just for a clip, that's fine. There are,
Yeah,
free video
I agree.
cameras
Chair,
here, which is
Chair,
very
the
handy.
motion was very clear why we were doing it.
why you're.
So the motion, if you let me finish the motion, it was
Well, no,
very clear.
the problem is, Mr. Mazer, is this is not to debate a motion which would open up unlimited time for debate. This is to present a notice of motion, which you can do electronically instead of eating into the committee's time. So I would.
Point of order.
I would say, I think you made some points that you wanted to make, but I'd like to go on to Ms. Taylor-Roy now, and you can send the.
You had a point of order.
Point
down
of
there.
order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Just, if Mr. Mazer has 30 seconds in his time, is he not allowed to use that time how he wishes and continue?
Well, he's already used it. I mean,
I don't know if he used it since we started the point of order.
when
We
he
wasted
started
more
speaking,
time having this conversation.
When he started speaking, there was 20 seconds left in Mr. Leslie's time, and I think we're well over the 20 seconds. So I think you made your point, Mr. Mazer. I mean, you made your point in the time that I did allow you, but I think yes. Now we're going to have to go on to Ms. Taylor-Roy and wrap this up. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr.
I
Chair.
don't even know if it was a point of order. Is that a point of order when Ms. Collins raised? Was that a point of order that Ms. Collins raised? I guess it was because it was about the rules, I suppose, in a way. But do you have a point of order, Mr. Leslie?
I was going to continue on hers, but I will raise one. I just ask the clerk if we could look at this precedent so we know for next time whether or not the member should be allowed to finish his statements once he begins it.
But when he's not moving a motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's find out. When you're not moving a motion, can you speak forever? That's the question. So okay, we're going to go now to Ms. Taylor-Roy.